I'm going to call the April 11th Placer County Transportation Board meeting to order. Wes, why don't you lead us in the flag salute, please? Could I have roll call, please?
Allard. Here. Baker. Here. Broadway.
Here.
Harvey.
Here.
Mackey. Nader. Euler.
Here.
Okay, can I get approval of the action minutes?
I'll second.
Are we specific just to, Mr. Chairman, just to the February 28th meeting on this motion? Because once we get down to the March meeting, I was not in attendance. So we're just taking item C, is that what
Yes.
you're looking for?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We have a second.
I think we had a motion and a second, didn't
Is
we?
there a motion?
In a second, yes.
Okay, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Item D, can I get approval of summary minutes for March 21st?
Move rule.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Item E, approval of summary minutes for March 28th.
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstain?
Oh,
We're not gonna, it's not gonna work.
we got 3 and 3.
Got that one?
I don't believe that passes. We may need to
No.
do a roll call on that one.
What's that?
We may, I don't believe that
I
passes
heard
with only,
3 abstentions. I think you're gonna have to kick that one over.
yeah,
Yeah.
Or we can wait until Stan shows up and pick it up then.
yeah. Just as a matter of interest, our attorney says that you don't have to have been at the meeting in order to vote on the minutes, but that's of course up to the board members.
Do you want me to
Okay.
do it
All
over
right.
again?
Okay, we have a pass.
Okay. Item E, move to approve the summary minutes of March 28th.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Okay.
Rebel.
And that does pass.
Yes, it passes.
Agenda review.
I did want to point out that you have an amended agenda, that is the salmon-colored agenda that puts the closed session into your agenda as item L.
Okay. We need action on that one. Do we need the action to switch it over to the new agenda? No, okay. Public comment is next, item G. Anyone from the public care to speak? Please come up to the podium and the microphone.
Good morning, Commission, fellow residents of Rockland, Placer County. I'm Dr. Cheryl Hunter Marston. I have been a resident in Roseville from 1999 to present day. What I wanted to talk to you all about is I have my meetings for my work in front of me, not my notes for you. So if someone else wants to come to the pulpit until I go back to my car and get those.
Uh-oh.
I made all these notes last night. So, unless I have to speak from top of my head if there's no one else to speak, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've done this before. So, hopefully I'll have my data correct. The city of Roseville, from 1995 to 2005, and bear with me if you all already have this information, its population increased 72.3%, from 59,000 and some change up to 102. The Roseville Police Department currently puts the population at 132,000 and change and growing. We are 11% of the geographic square mile of San Diego. And we're 72% of the population density of San Diego. So you can see the imbalance there. I wanted to talk about, first of all, the local transportation in the city of Roseville. Just to give you an example how it's bogged down, is that I just checked with the local bus service. It takes from the Galleria Roseville to Sutter Roseville 2.25 hours to go 4 miles and 3 transfers. We're about, like I said, 132,000. The many data sources, the state, US, and in the city counts, I forget the group, what it's called, says that at 132,000 and in our projected growth, we will reach the minimum population of 200,000 for a medium-sized city. And so, of course, we all know that we have to plan for that type of growth. One of the things also about the local transit is at any given time of the day, the intersection, and I don't have the names in front of me because my paper is in the car, the traffic from across Roseville Parkway from Galleria to the fountains can hold, one to three people can hold up 10 to 250 cars in a crosswalk. You're going a crosswalk. So I believe there's a necessity for a pedestrian overpass in that area. Roseville Parkway was developed and planned and the ground laid for it to be a parkway, not a community intersection. And so it's a thoroughfare if it's a parkway. What is the other thing? Okay, I can't remember all the points I was going to make about local transit. The commuter service. The commuter service, I believe, in Roseville and Placer can be have an express route and a regular routine route. I understand that currently the management of the Roseville commuter service takes recommendations from individuals. And I understand when we were more like Mayberry, everybody I worked at 16th and Capitol, 200 feet from a bus stop. I worked at 15th and K, 75 feet from a bus stop. Of course I want a bus near me, but according to the Roseville Transit, there are about 2 sets of 4 stops that are between like 100 and 150 feet of each other. Those can be condensed. The turnaround time for Galleria departures and arrivals is close to 12 hours. Now, and it has, at other stops, it has 2 to 3 times more parking spaces on which you stop more often. And I'm going to not monopolize the time. I've probably been here 5 minutes and rushing in. I forgot my notes, but hopefully I did okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And I can actually make copies and leave my notes here if you'd like.
Any other public comment?
Thank you for your comment. I'm a new resident in Auburn. I'm struggling with my English, so I will try to explain very slow my problem here. I wonder how many of you have taken the bus in Auburn before? Good. That's good to know. I don't have a car, so I have to take the bus frequently. But every time I try to take the bus, I always have an issue with that. First of all, because there's not a map. When you go to a bus stop in Auburn, there's not a map. So there's not even a code. You don't know what time the bus is coming. So I've always have taken buses in all the cities I've lived. And it's the first time I go to a bus stop and I don't see any signal of where I am or what number is that bus stop. So there is a phone number. I called the phone number and they said, press 2 if you want to hear the instructions in Spanish. Guess what? I press 2, no one answers. Okay, let's go with English. I have done this like 3 times before. I call in English. I said, I would like to know what time the bus is coming. Okay, where are you? It's like, well, I'm not sure where I am. Tell me exactly where you are so we can transfer your call to someone else, and that someone else is going to tell you what time the bus is coming. So it's like, okay. 5 minutes later, they transfer my call twice. And finally, I talked to the bus driver to see what time my bus is coming. I think that's a big issue. So finally, the bus driver tells me what time he is coming to exactly where I am. But I believe that is a very easy issue to solve, just to put a map or at least a number so I can tell to the bus driver I'm in the A37 bus stop. So, well, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Yes, my name is Jerry Mitchell. I live in Rockland. And I was here a couple years ago talking about the very same location I'm going to talk about today as an example of the kind of problem that the bus system has in terms of being effective and efficient. We often see them driving around relatively empty, which, you know, is probably the result of the competition from other providers of transportation. But nevertheless, as I understand it, the state requires us to have this transit system, and that's fine. But at least it could be is more heavily used to achieve the benefit is one of the benefits it's intended to achieve, which is a reduced amount of automobile traffic and therefore reduce pollution and have impacts on folks. So on Sunset Boulevard, across from Bel Air, near Cobblestone, where it crosses Sunset, is a big empty lot. And behind that, they're building some homes. Across the street, westerly, there's about a mile worth of apartments, 2-story apartments, where there's likely to be ample number of potential customers for the bus system. And so back then, and again today, I want to mention that I had suggested to our Planning Commission and City Council that a shelter be built there because it'd be logical. Right now, there's a well-established bus stop there, a pole in the ground with a sign on it, with no number on it either. And so that is the extent of the commitment of the county system, as I understand it, is to provide that kind of service. So it had been suggested that a bus stop shelter be built there, and the impression I got is we don't want to build any shelters or allow any shelters to be built because it'll end up being somebody's home. And I can understand that concern, given the increase in homelessness we have. So the next step down would be, okay, let's just have a bench there so that older people or folks that don't want to hang on a pole, as I've seen them do, or sit on somebody's lawn in other locations waiting for the bus, could have some reasonable comfort and accommodation. Well, that went nowhere. And however, oftentimes it is legitimate that the cities and perhaps the county as well waits for somebody to want to come in and develop a project before you introduce those kinds of amenities as means of transferring the cost to those who are more likely to benefit from it. And such has occurred. A fast food company, I don't remember his name, came in several months ago and went through our planning commission. When the planning commission said, we want to put up this chicken food thing, Louisiana style. And it appears 2-story, but it's not really 2-story. They kind of pick up the Bourbon Street, New Orleans kind of theme, and I think that's great. It's wonderful. In fact, they oohed and awed about how they're going to do this fancy ironwork on the outside of the 2nd story, yada, yada, yada. And so when public comments came up, I said, hey, why don't you just notch out 2 by 6 foot in your landscaping there, which you're planning to have anyway, it's also gonna have a drive-through, and put down some concrete. And then put a bench there. You could even do one in keeping with the design of that particular building. And that would be an asset to the people who use the bus. It'd be an asset to the people whose business is there, because they maybe actually attract customers. And this proposal was made. And of course, as you know, in public meetings, you got to make your point, raise your questions, and sit down, because you'll never get a chance to challenge them if they don't answer you. Well, that's in fact what happened. But one of the planning commissioners said, what about that? What do you think? And the planner, whose name I won't mention because I think he's getting direction from somebody else, said, you know, we leave that up to the local transportation planning agency, meaning you guys. So there's this disconnect between the city of Rockland, at least, and I suspect other places as well, between their charter and what these cities plan to do. So, and I've seen this now over the last 2 years, and I'm sure it's occurred before then. So you need to think in terms of your customer, not just your current customers, but your potential customers. You could go a lot further in filling up these buses and making them more efficient, such as they are, and maybe even competing effectively with Uber and other options that people are forced to accept. And do the things such as this lady just mentioned here. Identify your bus stop by number. Put in at least a bench. And I'm not talking about having Joe's Insurance come in and throw a bench in there. I mean, it's pretty tacky. But really have whoever's developing a property do it appropriately. And oh, by the way, across the street is a Bel Air shopping center. And right next to it is a hunk of property that has a bus stop on it right now, that is a pole, and it will eventually be developed, that property will be developed, and there'll be an opportunity to make it more effective for the traveling public and to aim more closely to the objectives that I would assume the Placer County Transportation Agency has. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
If I might, I did want to note that further on the agenda, there is the presentation on the short-range transit plan, so a lot of the transit comments might be more appropriate in that part of the agenda, as opposed to
Okay.
public comment is usually for items not on the agenda.
Is yours have to do with the transit plans?
It does, but it only takes about 30 seconds.
Okay, can you wait until we get to that point then, please? Thank you. All right, any other public comment on something that's not on the agenda? Okay. Let's go on to the consent calendar. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Does anybody have anything they need to remove from the consent calendar?
No.
Nope. Anybody from the public? Okay, with that.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Okay, now we have to adjourn as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and convene as the Placer County Airport Land Use Commission.
Good morning, members of the Airport Land Use Commission. David Melko here, and I will be handling this item. We're asking the commission today to conduct a public hearing regarding consistency of the City of Lincoln zoning ordinance amendments with the Placer County Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. And we're recommending that the commission find that the zoning ordinance amendments are consistent with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. So by way of background, you serve as with another hat as the Airport Land Use Commission, and the Airport Land Use Commission represents 3 airports within Placer County: Blue Canyon, Auburn Municipal Airport, and Lincoln Regional Airport. And under state law, requires that any zoning ordinance revision that affects lands within an airport influence area, which is typically a 2-mile area around each airport, be reviewed for consistency with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. In this instance, the airport land use compatibility plan is the one for Lincoln Regional Airport. So today, the city of Lincoln is, the city of Lincoln is proposing various text amendments to their municipal code with respect to the zoning ordinance. And the city is requesting that the commission determine whether the proposed amendments are consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan. Those amendments are included as attachment 1. The city of Lincoln City Council conducted a first reading on the proposed amendments back in February, and will consider a second reading and approval of the zoning ordinance amendments, possibly at its April 24th meeting, including the determination of the Airport Land Use Commission that will be forwarded to the City Council. So under state law, we're required to do the public hearing and notice 10 days prior to the public hearing. The notice was published in the Lincoln Messenger, that's the airport, or that's the newspaper within the vicinity of the airport. We also posted it on the city's e-newsletter page, which is sent out to a number of the city residents, and it's also posted on our website. And only one entity basically requested any information with respect to the zoning ordinance amendments, and that was the Lincoln Regional Aviation Association. It's a group of pilots that work out of and fly out of the airport there, and they just wanted to kind of know what exactly what the zoning ordinance amendments involved, and I explained that, and they had no further comment, at least at that particular time. So the proposed zoning ordinance amendments are an effort by the city to improve clarity within any zoning ordinance. Anybody that goes through a zoning ordinance knows that there's always opportunities to improve clarity, provide increased flexibility with respect to how development is handled, and to update the zoning ordinance to ensure that it's consistent with the city's general plan. The city's general plan was adopted back in March 2008. This commission, at that point in time, made a consistency determination with the then 2000 airport land use compatibility plan. And then again, when we updated the airport land use compatibility plan back in 2014, we made you made another determination of consistency with the city's general plan. So the zoning ordinance amendments propose to address 6 issues, and I've tried to summarize them within the staff report. There's a section on zoning interpretations. Basically, that would allow the community development director to make various zoning interpretations without having it to go through the planning commission. And of course, anything that the director does would be subject to appeal to the city council. So there's a clarification there. There's issue with home occupation, and basically the zoning ordinance amendments would relax the residential development standards so that home-based business that would like to operate on a standard-sized lot within the city could do so. Manufactured homes is another area, and this would add manufactured homes as a permitted use within the single-family zone. Commercial standards, there are several commercial standards that are identified, and basically they would expand definition of beauty salons, allow kennels as a use, blend the automobile, repair and sales service into one category, require that outdoor restaurants that serve alcohol would have a 4-foot barrier outside of the outside where the people would sit, provide additional development standards for pawn shops, and would delete the highway commercial zoning category because that particular use is not identified or recognized as a valid land use within the general plan. 5th issue would deal with recycling facilities, and basically it would allow for a conditional use permit for vending machines and small collection facilities in the commercial district, and would also allow for all sizes of recycling redemption type facilities with a conditional use permit in the light industrial zones. And lastly, there would, on public notices, it would ensure that notices are required for all development permit hearings. So that's kind of the zoning ordinance amendments in a nutshell. And although under state law, they're required to submit that to us for a consistency determination, so it's considered a mandatory referral. The proposed changes, as I summarized, really have no impact on the airport land use compatibility with respect to noise, safety, overflight. And with that recommendation, or we would recommend basically that the staff recommends to the Airport Land Use Commission that you have 3 findings you can make, and the finding that we would recommend is that you find that the amendments are consistent with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. There is a representative today from the City of Lincoln, from their planning department, in case if there are any questions from the commissioners. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. You go to public hearing and then take your action.
Thank you very much for the staff report. Does anyone from the board have any questions or comments? Anybody from the public have any questions or comments? Yes, please come up to the podium.
You'll want to formally open the public hearing.
Oh, okay. Open the public hearing. Thank you.
Mr. Milko, thank you for your comments, appreciate that. I'd like to stress one item that we have been mentioning over and over and over again. Oh, my name is Rocky Green. I'm the president for the Lincoln Regional Aviation Association. Our problem is that the Village 5 represents some issue with relative distance away from the airport. That being that when our aircraft are on final for runway 33, the final approach means that some of these aircraft are only going to be 300 to 500 feet above homes. 300 to 500 feet above homes. Currently, under the present operation there, our base leg, which means if you look at it from a rectangle, something like this, we fly a downwind leg, a base leg, and then we fly a final to make our landing. Our downwind leg is 1,000 feet above the ground. When we turn to our base leg to start our approach to the airport, we start our descent from downwind to that 300 to 500 feet over homes that are proposed in Village 5, and then we'll make our turn to final to make our landing for runway 33. One of the things that we tried to do with the LRAA tried to do, and we were fairly successful at, was we got with other groups at the airport, the EAA 1541 chapter, ourselves. We talked to a lot of pilots, and we found a way to mitigate a lot of that problem by having aircraft, instead of turning their base leg and descending to that 300 to 500 feet over the homes, they're going to follow Highway 65, basically just go over the top of Highway 65 before they turn final, so that we mitigated a lot of the area that we'd be flying very low level over homes before we made our final approach. Now, the bottom line is there's always going to be a final approach, whether we like it or not, whether the homes there like it or not, there's always going to be a final approach. Now, the city has taken some numbers and said that we only use runway 33 for landing 15% of the time. That doesn't sound like very much, but let's take it the other way. That means we use it 85% of the time for takeoffs, which means we have even louder, make more noise, louder aircraft, and when we turn our crosswind, we're still going to be flying over those homes. So we've proposed to try to find a way to work with the city and the county to try to get the pilots to fly straight out until they get to Highway 65 again, and then make the turn over Highway 65. We thought we were pretty successful at doing that. We got the pilots pretty much to buy into it. We submitted some language to the city that would modify the FAA documents, Airport Facilities Directory, so that when other pilots fly into the area, they understand we would like them to follow that Highway 65. So I bring that out because I want to show you that we're trying to help and not just sit here and point fingers. But you've got to turn around and look at us for our final approach here a little bit too. One way or another, we're going to be flying through that on our final approach. we're gonna be flying low. Now, the extreme end of the runway, they've got rural, it's set up for zoning for rural residential, which means, I believe, one home for every 10 acres. And we can live with that. That's a very good thing for us. We can make that work. Unfortunately, just at the outer edge of that is commercial land where they can now have warehouses and so forth that are a little bit taller than the average house, obviously. We're trying to find ways so that on our final approach, the actual center line, if you will, the center line for our approach into the runway, if that can be somewhat clear, and one gentleman mentioned the fact that maybe they could use parking lots through that area and not put the buildings there. Well, we would probably take that too. Anything besides running into a building would probably save us, the pilots and passengers and people on the ground. So we're still watching it very closely, and we still need the help of the city and the county to help us mitigate that issue with those 3 commercial buildings that's planned in that same approach zone. And we'd like you to take that into consideration. We're not going to give up on that. We've tried to mitigate all the other probable causes or possible incidents, excuse me. We think we did a good job with that, but we need help with that last little bit. So I just wanted to make that clear, okay? Thank you very much.
Just a moment, sir. I have a question for you. Across
No,
Highway 65,
we can't have, you can come up and speak, but you can't ask questions of him while we're here, please.
I just want him to share more information.
He's already said
Well,
his piece.
it would be of interest to everybody here if he would state at what altitude and for how long approximately will he be going across 65, and what are the 2 heights of the 2 commercial buildings that are planned? That would be helpful for everybody to hear.
I thought he stated that. They dropped from 1,000 down to 500
Did he
going,
say 500 over 65?
they dropped from 1,000 to 500 going over 65 is what he said, so,
Okay, for how long? I didn't hear that either.
yes.
And I didn't hear how high the commercial buildings that you would be.
You may want to have a side conversation between the two
Yeah.
of you afterward.
I don't need it. I thought everyone should know the information, but if you deem that it's not necessary,
It's-
it's okay.
If you'd like to provide testimony, you need to come up to the podium and, again, introduce yourself and so on for the formal hearing process.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any other public testimony? With that, I'm gonna go ahead and close.
Good morning. I'm Mike Arabedian for Placer Group Sierra Club, and we offer our support to the pilots in their position and before you and to them in any way we can. We think they're doing the right thing, proposing the right thing land use wise in terms of public safety and environmental safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close public hearing, bring it back to the board. The board have any questions or comments? Okay, can I go ahead and, get a motion? And you have to decide which one you wanna do.
Approval of the staff recommended action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Okay, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close public,
Adjourn.
adjourn public hearing.
No, we have to adjourn as the Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, then reconvene as the PCTPA. convener.
Yes,
Yep.
and reconvene as the Placer County Transportation Committee. And with that, now we go to item J, public workshop. And this is for the transportation operator, short-range transit plans.
Okay, members of the board, I have this item as well, so I go from planes to buses. So we're multimodal. Or at least today I am. Okay, we're recommending that the board conduct a public workshop to discuss various alternatives that are currently under consideration for Auburn Transit, Placer County Transit, Roseville Transit, and then the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, which is an agency that you wear another hat for. And to obtain public comments today, it's a public workshop, and to provide us comments, the board, and direction with respect to the development of the short-range transit plans. So what is a short-range transit plan? It's a planning document that basically presents various steps that each operator will take over a 5 to a 7 year period. Our plans look out 7 years, and to improve services and to identify various capital infrastructure needs and identify the revenues to accomplish and to implement those services and those particular projects. The existing short-range plans were last developed and adopted by the various jurisdictions and this board as well back in 2011. That was a 7-year plan, so we're due for updates. And so we're here in 2018, and we contracted with LSE Transportation to prepare those plans. I will note that the LSE staff unfortunately are sick, and so they won't be here today to do the PowerPoint presentation, so I will stand in for them and do that. Okay, so each plan, the 4 transit operators, is being developed concurrently, and it's kind of ideal to do it that way because it allows us to maximize coordination and look at various efficiencies between the various transit services. The short-range plans also serve an important need for PCTPA as part of the evaluating and monitoring. Under the Transportation Development Act, we need to do every 3 years a review of performance of the transit systems. And then we also annually do the unmet transit needs process. And so the short-range plans are having a short-range plan in place is one of the criteria that is looked at in terms of determining whether a particular comment raised at that point in time in the process is considered reasonable to meet. So today is a public workshop, opportunity for comments, both from the board and from the public. And I will want to clarify the schedule that's in the very last paragraph of the staff report. Since the publication of this staff report, we have modified the schedule. The schedule shows that the plans would be completed and presented to you in June. We have heard a number of comments from our transit operators regarding the length of time they need for reviews, and so we've incorporated that. So we will come back to this board with final plans in August. And the good news is that the consultant is able to do that with no additional cost. So it just stretches out the timeline there. That will mean kind of working backwards. In June, instead of, as the staff report notes, accepting the plans, you will hear draft plans at that point in time, and we will more than likely hold a public hearing because that's a requirement with Federal Transit Administration funding. And then working further backwards, here in May, we will hold a second public workshop, which will take into account all of the input that we've heard today, both from the board as well as the public. The consultant will basically, in the month of April here, work like crazy and put together and do the analysis and working with the transit operators going into May and develop recommendations that we will then present to the board for more consideration at that May meeting. And then with that, unless there are any questions at this point in time, I would ask that the board allow me to go through the PowerPoint. There's 29 slides, so there's a lot of material. I'm going to try to cover it fairly quickly because a lot of it, while we look at different operators, is kind of the same thought and idea. So I probably will go through the slides at a fairly quickly pace. And then at the conclusion of the slide presentation, be more than glad to take any comments, and then you may want to open up for public comment. And I believe there are a number of individuals here that may want to speak to transit services.
Okay, is there any questions before we start the slide? Please do, Dave.
Okay. Okay, so, and I've already noted that today, the workshop purpose, we're presenting a variety of alternatives, and they cover both service, capital infrastructure, as well as financial and institutional alternatives, as opportunity for everybody to put input into the process. And as I noted, that the study purpose is to update the short-range plans for these 4 particular operators. And the goal is to develop a strategy for the next 7 years so that the operators have a plan in terms of pursuing federal and state funding and implementing various service and capital infrastructure projects. So where are we at? So we have completed a variety of products at this point. There's been demographic and literature review. On the literature review aspect, that's basically looking into what services and projects are being developed elsewhere within California as well as the country that we could use as models to deal with particular issues here with the transit services. There's an existing services memorandum, which also looks at the productivity of the services. We worked with our other staff person here on the transit needs process, and we coordinated and we got a lot of input with respect to that. We've done onboard surveys of all of the bus systems, so we've actually surveyed the riders. We've conducted what's called a virtual community workshop, which was online and extensively advertised. We got a lot of input through that. And then lastly, we've done what are called pop-up workshops, and those were done at transit centers in Lincoln, Auburn, and Sierra College, and in Roseville as well. And what is yet to come? As I mentioned, April and May here, we're going to be crunching through all of the numbers and refining all of the alternatives that are presented today to come back to the board at the end of May with some consultant recommendations. We will also be holding stakeholder focus groups. The invitation is out to a variety of groups, including the jurisdictions as to whether they want us to meet with particular entities. And so as an example, next week I will be in front of the Placer Collaborative Network Resource Fair to give a brief presentation and to take input at that point in time. And then, as I noted, as part of the staff report, the draft plans will come back to this board in June with final adoption in August. So a number of these slides here will kind of indicate similar ideas. So when we did the onboard surveys, Placer County Transit, we had over 700 responses, which is actually a very good turnout. And basically, what we have heard is that people would like to see more service, increased frequencies, later evening service, earlier morning and evening service on Saturdays, and also on Sundays, Sunday service. And so the 2 charts there show on the left-hand side, it's for the fixed route service, and on the right-hand side, it's for the commuter service. And so more is what a lot of people would like to see. Similar onboard survey for Auburn, 56 responses. Auburn is a much smaller system, but this is also a good turnout with respect to the ridership. And biggest identifier here was Sunday service, and also additional Saturday service and later evening service, as well as more frequent service. You'll start to see a theme here in terms of the comments. On Roseville, we had 625 responses, also another good turnout, both spread over fixed route and the commuter. And on the fixed route, people would like to see Sunday service. That means fixed route service on Sunday, later evening, and more frequent service, additional service on Saturday. On the commuter, more frequent service, more routes to serve extended areas. The extended areas are pretty much areas downtown. So for example, to go and serve the Broadway corridor, there's large DMV building there, state employees. Also serve the UC Medical Center area. It's a growing medical area within Midtown Sacramento, and a lot of Placer residents work in that particular area. Pop-up workshop. Responses here, it's always kind of a pop-up workshop is where you kind of unannounced hold a workshop at a particular location. And so we did this at the transit centers in Lincoln, Auburn, and Roseville, and then we did it at Sierra College. So not everybody is necessarily aware, but when they pass by, then they give their particular comments about bus service. And so for the effort, I think we got a good turnout, and the theme here is that people are interested in technology improvements, using of the smartphone, and real-time bus tracking. The woman earlier talked about, not knowing where she was in terms of the bus stop and the location, and lack of info on the signage, which is common throughout the industry in the United States. But having the ability to have some sort of coding of that bus stop, which would then be able to tell the operator, the dispatch center, oh, this person is located here, the next bus is arriving in 10 minutes. And so that's a technology that will be looked at and was requested by members of the public. And then more people indicated that they would use Uber, Lyft. You will also see an acronym in the PowerPoint that's called TNC. That stands for Transportation Network Companies. Those two particular firms are considered transportation network companies. And a lot of people would like to use those services because in this particular county, because of the bus services are spread out, because the land use is lower density, you have what is commonly called in the industry a first mile, last mile issue. People have a hard time getting to the bus stop because of the distances involved. And parking isn't always available at every particular bus stop. Virtual community workshop. We have, as I mentioned, that this was online, and this was done over a short period. We had over 400 responses. Also, I believe another good turnout. Interestingly, when we did the virtual community workshop, as you can see, using a transportation network company, Uber, Lyft, and getting a discounted fare, more people said no versus yes, but I think that probably just requires us to delve more into it and to explain more about how the particular service would be used. And so I wouldn't at this point rule it out, and you'll see later in the presentation that we're recommending that that's an alternative that be further explored. Why don't you travel or can't travel to your transit destination? Stops too far away. It's not close enough, or the transit service takes too long. Most of the services here in the county operate on hour frequencies, and so if you miss the bus, you have over an hour to catch the next bus. And some of the services don't operate early enough or late enough, and so it makes it hard if you have shift work, and so being able to use the particular service. Okay, so the presentation here will now kind of march on for each operator. So we'll do Auburn Transit, and then there'll be Placer County Transit, Roseville Transit, and then ending up with the CTSA, which will then close out the presentation. So Auburn has 3 routes, a blue route, and a red route, and on Saturday it's called the green route. There have been a number of comments raised through the public input phase to reconfigure the routes, use transportation networks, that's your Uber, Lyft, for bus route deviations. Currently, Auburn's route is what's called a route deviated service. You do that, and you're allowed under federal law to do that so that you don't have to have what's called ADA complementary paratransit, a separate dial-a-ride system. But that means when someone calls in, the bus route will then deviate, and I believe Auburn allows up to 2 deviations per hour to accomplish that goal. So one of the recommendations, or some of the recommendations here, is to turn the Auburn system more into a traditional fixed route system and then use the transportation network companies to accomplish the ADA aspect, which is a little bit problematic because a number of transportation network companies haven't yet addressed as to how they're going to address that issue. And so that's a challenge that's out there that many public transit systems face, including ourselves here. There were also comments about limiting the service to the city limits, not going into the unincorporated county. A number of people have asked about adding service to Luther Road and adding Sunday service and improving coordination with the Placer County Transit Service. In terms of the capital and fare alternatives, the capital alternatives are fairly, I will just say routine in terms of what we will show in the short-range plan. All vehicles need to be replaced. Fare box equipment needs to be modernized so that you can make sure that it is a fare and not a token, from a casino or something like that. We need to look at alternative fuels. This state is moving to zero-emission vehicles, and so that's going to be a big item over the next 7 years, particularly with transit fleets. Bus stop improvements. You heard earlier comments about bus stop improvements, a bench or a shelter, and having those identified in the plan allows the opportunity for the transit operator, as well as any jurisdictions, to apply for funding to do those bus stop improvements. An example would be on the Prop 1B program that has been in existence in the past 10 years. We have extensively used those funds to do various bus stop improvements. And so that's a fund source that kind of, all of a sudden, voters approved it, and people looked at plans, and is there something in the plan that talks about bus stop improvements? Because the feds and the state will want to make sure that it's in a plan so that they will then approve funding for it. And then noted coordinating marketing strategies between all of the operators. On fares, alternatives, the commentary basically was to align the fares with Placer County Transit, particularly the age for children. Each of the operators have different age ranges for children, and standardizing that would perhaps be beneficial to the riding public. Join the Connect Card. The Connect Card is a SACOG-led effort, and a number of your transit operators in the greater region, including Placer County Transit and Roseville Transit, are part of the Connect Card. Auburn Transit currently is not part of it. It can be part of it, but it will then, going back to the capital alternatives, require modernizing the fare equipment to be able to do that swipe card. And then a common theme that you will see on the other operators is to implement a regional day pass. Each operator kind of approaches the daily pass in a slightly different manner, and having a coordinated effort in that regard would be beneficial. Okay, take a breath here. Placer County Transit. Placer County Transit, covers the western portion of Placer County, and it's basically an inner-city operator between Colfax to Auburn, Loomis, Rockland, Lincoln, and downtown Roseville and downtown Sacramento. So I'm going to go through here a little bit by their service types. And so because Placer County Transit covers a large territory. So Placer County Transit operates service in Lincoln. They Lincoln contracts with Placer County to provide that service. And so the route there is known as the Lincoln Circulator. And a common theme that came up was to add service to the senior community at Del Webb, and also extend service further west of downtown and provide earlier Saturday service. The Lincoln Sierra College route, that's the route that goes from Lincoln over to Roseville Galleria and then to Sierra College in Rockland. And that service currently operates on an hourly headway, and people are requesting to move that to a 30-minute frequency. There's also new development areas within Rockland, and so in some manner, it served that development with this particular route. Add earlier Saturday service, add Sunday service, and later service on weekends, and serve the Placer County Public Defender's Office. Auburn to light rail. So that's the route that leaves the Auburn Multimodal Station and goes to the Watt Avenue Light Rail Station, and stops at various transit centers in between. Service frequency is currently 60 minutes. Increase it to 30-minute frequency, particularly from 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Add additional runs at the 7 and 3 p.m. Timeframe because of overcrowding issues. I mean, a number of people indicate or have commented that they see buses going around that are empty, but during the commute periods, many of your buses are crowded. That's where the ridership is. And so just a little, I guess, factoid here. when a transit operator buys a bus, they buy the bus to serve the peak commute period. So when you buy a 40-foot bus, you buy it to serve those commute periods because there's a number of people on there. Unfortunately, there isn't the financial base available for the system, the services to operate another fleet for the midday, smaller buses. People typically say that you should use smaller buses because the buses aren't crowded during the midday. Well, if you do that, then you're going to end up with a number of smaller buses then serving the commute period, which is going to create congestion. And it also increases the operating cost because every bus, at least at this point in time, requires an operator. At some point in the future, they may be automated, but that's still maybe a decade off. On the Auburn Light Rail, also look at consolidating some of the runs in terms of how they're currently scheduled and adding a Sunday service. Highway 49. The Highway 49 service is an interesting service. It's basically serves from the multimodal center out to the, get my directions right here, westerly portion of 49. And there are segments along there that have low productivity. And so the challenge here is to try to make the service so that all the productive segments line up and to eliminate the low productivity segments, because in that regard, then the overall productivity of the service increases. Evening service, a number of people indicated that there really wasn't a need for evening service. And so that is something that we'll take a further look at. Revisiting the dollar ride boundaries with Auburn Transit. That is an issue that was also recognized and briefly evaluated in the Placer County Rural Transit study we did about 3 years ago. And the recommendation in that study was that Placer County Transit and Auburn perhaps work together with respect to the dollar ride boundaries. Currently, there's overlap. Placer County has to provide a dollar ride service for the Highway 49, and it overlaps within the City of Auburn. The City of Auburn operates bus service, and they kind of serve the same areas. And so there may be some efficiencies that could be saved there for the public. Add Sunday service. Placer County operates 4 other services, or 3 other services within Placer County. There's a Taylor Road Shuttle. Recommendation out of the Placer County Rural Study would be to expand the deviation area. That will probably be a little bit difficult because of the road network that is within that corridor. It's very circuitous. So there were also recommendations to look at what's called microtransit and transportation network companies. Microtransit is basically transit service that is app-based. So people then would schedule their ride, through their smartphone at a particular point in time, and a little van or bus would come out and pick that individual up and take them to their appointment. So it works a little bit differently than the dollar ride service, but there are similarities. Recommendation to improve the service frequency. This is a 2-hour service frequency on Taylor Road Shuttle, and people are recommending that it go to 60 minutes. In the Alta Colfax corridor, there are kind of 2 divergent types of recommendation, 2 types of viewpoints at this point in time. One is to expand midday service 5 days a week to serve going from Auburn to the Alta Colfax area. Or perhaps maybe look at it at 3 days a week, a more limited option. The other aspect of that service is generally it's not productive overall, and there's a question as to whether or not we really need 5-day-a-week service. That maybe we could go back to 3-day-a-week service, which I was told was something that this service used to do many years ago, and then over time it went to 5. So we'll revisit that issue and work with Placer County and City of Colfax. In the Granite Bay area, Placer County provides dollar ride service, and it's so close to Roseville, and the travel patterns and the trip requests are from people in Granite Bay wanting to go to Roseville. So the logical look here would be to look at whether or not Placer County should contract with Roseville to provide some type of service there. And maybe that service would be of the microtransit transportation network option. And then there are two other rural service options, adding a Forest Hill Lifeline service 1 day a week and adding a Lifeline service to Sheridan, which would hook up also then to the State Route 193 corridor, which would bring it back to the Auburn Multimodal Center. And so that would be 1 day a week, and these two were recommendations that came out of the Placer Rural Transit Study. And then Commuter Express for Placer County. So based, very similar to the input on many slides ago in terms of the workshops, add routes and times, commentary from Lincoln residents, add commuter express service from Lincoln to either Roseville or to downtown Sacramento, extend service to the UC Medical Center and Stockton Broadway corridor. And there is a recommendation to look at the Auburn, the Colfax segment. Once again, it's not necessarily as productive as we would like it to be, and so maybe we should reduce the commuter runs there or eliminate it, or look at another way. For example, ride sharing or van pool service should be promoted for those residents that live further out in that particular area. And then, as you have heard through our board here on many occasions, Capitol Corridor has got a third track project, and so we're going to have 3 round trips to Roseville. And so connecting that Roseville station via Placer County Transit is something that people said would be a good idea. Very similar to the Auburn Transit Capital and Fares, the vehicle replacement, the alternative fuels, the bus stop improvements, marketing strategies. A new item here for Placer County, and you'll also see it on the Roseville slide, is to look at perhaps signal preemption at congested intersections. This is always kind of a controversial issue. My friends that are traffic engineers don't always are enthused by that idea, but if you look at it from the transit operator perspective, in maintaining the schedule, which is difficult in traffic conditions, the operator really has 2 choices: change the schedule or add another bus. And when you add another bus, then of course there's the capital equipment, but there's the ongoing operating cost. So if you can do a capital infrastructure fix by doing signal preemption, you save the operator on the operating cost part. And that's something that has been noted with the Placer County service. Fare alternatives, just like with Auburn, look at a regional day pass, increase their base bus fare to improve their fare recovery ratio, which they do meet, but it's close. And align the Placer commuter fares with the Roseville Transit commuter fares. And this last item here is also with, you'll see this on Roseville, is to have a college pass with the Connect card. We have a large community college in Placer County, Sierra College. A lot of students go there by bus, and a number of colleges have college passes, including the community college system in Sacramento, the Los Rios area. And so having a college pass, a discounted pass, work through the Connect card may be an advantage in terms of alleviating the parking and traffic crunch at that particular college in Rockland. And it would require working with Sierra College on that as well. Roseville. Okay, I'll take another deep breath here. So Roseville, fixed route service. So there's 4 routes here, C, G, F, and E. They all have, or in a nutshell, not as productive as would be liked by the Roseville transit staff. And so there's various recommendations. One is to eliminate Roseville service to Sierra College and have that service picked up more by Placer County Transit. Provide hourly service on the routes, combine various routes, once again for, to use one bus for hourly service, and have the routes C and F transfer at Lewis and Orlando. The Route S, that's a route that serves the western portion of Roseville, and there's a request to have it stop at the Placer County Public Defender Office and the social services out at Sunset. Improve the service to 60-minute frequency, and then reroute the service back into downtown, into the Galleria. More on the local fixed routes. There's a Route L, which serves the eastern portion of Roseville, it goes down Douglas Boulevard. That may be the candidate to look at to serving Granite Bay, if we were to do it with fixed route. Route M is a route that perhaps needs to be broken up into 2 routes and serving 2 different geographic areas in West Roseville. Route D is a service maybe where route deviations, the Auburn Transit example, and doing the route deviations may be something that works in a particular locale. And then later service on Saturday for 3 particular routes. Cost-saving alternatives. These come about with a variety of the routes that I've mentioned, starting at 1 hour later and eliminating certain routes after 7 p.m. Dial-A-Ride, focusing the Dial-A-Ride service on specific areas versus having the Dial-A-Ride available citywide, you would have more service sectors for the Dial-A-Ride service. And then because Capitol Corridor is coming to Roseville with 3 round trips, connect the train with the bus system. Commuter service. Number of requests, and you may have heard this through the unmet transit needs process a number of times. Requests for earlier service from Sacramento. Many employees start earlier shifts and can leave at 3 p.m. And so getting back to Roseville, and doing so would leave overcrowding on some of the commuter buses. More stops at Mahaney Park for the various commuter runs, and eliminate the reverse commute service. So what is a reverse commute service? So think of the commuter bus leaving Roseville in the morning and going to downtown Sacramento. Well, then from Sacramento back to Roseville is the reverse commute. It makes stops in between, or can make stops in between. But there's a lack of ridership on that reverse commute. And so we will weigh whether or not it makes sense to actually pick up passengers and bringing that bus back, or is it more cost-effective to run what's called deadhead service? Just you're bringing that bus back to the yard. Some people have requested a shuttle to the light rail from the West Roseville area, and then, as you've seen on previous slides, various marketing and branding coordination. And in this particular instance, between the Placer commuter service and the Roseville Transit commuter service. The idea here basically is you've got 2 commuter services. We need to brand it and portray it as we've got this commuter service that's available to any Placer resident. And you can either catch this bus or catch this bus. Doesn't matter what the colors are. It's all coordinated. The capital alternatives are very similar to Placer counties. And as I noted previously, signal preemption at congested intersections within Roseville is an issue that needs to be addressed with their bus system. And fare alternatives, very similar with the Placer County, implement a regional day pass, coordinate their commuter fares with Placer County, and implement a college pass with the Connect card. Okay, one more deep breath. Not used to this pace. So now, you, as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency Board, this short-range plan will be the short-range plan for that particular agency. So we have a variety of programs. The My Rides is a volunteer transportation program that we work with Seniors First. We partner with them. And they bring Area 4 funding to the table, and we bring our public transit dollars to the table. And it's a very good alternative to traditional public transportation, particularly for seniors. So we need to increase volunteer recruitment, because what makes this work is volunteers. That's what keeps that program cost-effective, or colloquial terms, cheap. It just, you reimburse the volunteer the IRS mileage rate. But what we need is volunteers, particularly in the rural areas, and so we need to expand the marketing aspect to build up that recruitment, and also tap in with organizations that have volunteers that could then serve as transportation volunteers. They also have a scheduling software issue. They do a lot by paper, and we're in the computer age, and there is scheduling software available that is very inexpensive, and it's something that the CTSA could provide to help that program. On the Health Express, we partner once again with Seniors First. Seniors First brings hospital funding. So they bring Roseville, Kaiser, and Auburn, Sutter Faith funding to the table, and we provide matching funds. And we actually manage that service, and that will be an issue that will come up in a couple of slides here. But the request there is to add more trips to Sacramento. Currently, we operate 2 days a week to Sacramento, Tuesday and Thursdays, and there's probably enough demand there to go to 3 days and possibly 4 days. So there are a number of people who have doctor appointments, specialists in Sacramento, particularly amongst the senior population, and getting, in particular, to the UC Davis Medical Center, Stockton Corridor area, which there are a lot of medical clinics, as well as around Mercy Hospital, and then over to Mather, where the veterans facilities are. Speaking of veterans, veterans transportation is an issue that has come up, and there are opportunities to partner with transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft. They have done examples elsewhere in partnerships elsewhere in the country, and so it's something that it's worth exploring that can be done here. And after-hours hospital transportation is an issue. Right now, the Health Express operates till 5 p.m., but not everybody's medical need, gets resolved by 5 p.m. And not everybody has the transportation, and so having, perhaps working with transportation network companies is a way to address that issue. And then this is a new area for the CTSA. The CTSA is about organizing and coordinating and providing social service transportation, and this is transportation access to food. And the issue here is that there's a Meals on Wheels program, a My Meals program, and all that scheduling is done by, once again, by paper. And there are scheduling software that's available, that's inexpensive, and so you can improve the efficiency of the meal delivery. So if you think about it in performance measures, having the ability to get more meals delivered to more people who need that through something as simple as a scheduling software that could improve, that whole routing system is something that has been asked to be looked at. And then the other proposal here is to look at some sort of shuttle service to the senior lunch program and senior cafes. There are senior cafes that are held throughout the western urbanized area, and they're on a schedule, and so having a shuttle program that could take seniors from various apartment complexes to the lunch program so that they can get their meals and socialize and then return those people is something that has been done in a number of cities across the country and has been asked to look at here. Okay, we have a bus pass subsidy program, and this program was recommended by the Placer Collaborative Network, and there were, how shall I say it? There were grand ideas on how many people would be able to make use of this program. Unfortunately, the numbers haven't necessarily turned into reality. It hasn't really turned that way. And it may be that the way that we do the bus pass subsidy, currently we subsidize a one-ride ticket. And so with the operators moving to the Connect card, it may make better sense to have the pass program work through the Connect card and then load on the Connect card the number of trips that an entity could provide to a particular client so that they would be able to get to their various public assistance, general assistance appointments. And the multi-ride pass is a similar, is in the similar vein, working with the Connect card. South Placer Call Center. So currently the call center is, I don't think I have a brochure with me, but it's something that was implemented through the unmet transit needs process. And so it's a one number that you can call, whether you're 530 area code 916 or whatever the new area code is down in that part of southern Placer. And so you can call the call center and you can reserve and make reservations on the dial-a-ride systems and Health Express for your trips. And you can also get information with respect to bus services, as the woman had earlier indicated she wanted to know where, and when the next bus would be. So with the call center, everything is done by the phone. So, but people and places elsewhere in the country now allow online reservation, kind of like how you book your airline ticket. Or for me, I will be booking an Amtrak ticket to go up and see my daughter and help her pack up from college. And so the ability to be able to do that online is something that, and to do the advanced reservations is something that we will look at. There's also expand the vision for the call center here. And so an example of that would be a idea, actually it's been put into place in the Philadelphia area, and it's called Go-Go Grandparent. Now, what is Go-Go Grandparent? There are many seniors out there that don't have smartphones. And there are many seniors that do have smartphones that don't know necessarily how to use the apps or to do, to download the app for Uber and to arrange the transportation through Uber. So Go-Go Grandparent has been implemented through a consortium of social service agencies in the Philadelphia area. So it allows you, as the senior citizen, to call that entity, and they will then arrange that TNC ride for you. So they will arrange that, Uber or Lyft ride. And so that is something that, we could do as part of the call center here. And so that will be looked at. And from what I have gathered, that it's been fairly successful in the Philadelphia area. And then, as I had previously mentioned, we, as the CTSA staff, manage the Health Express. Okay, so PCTPA has many hats, including the CTSA. So I'm a PCTPA employee, but I'm also staff to the CTSA. We are a planning agency by all accounts. We're not a transit operator, and it may make more sense to have transit services provided by a transit operator. And in this instance here, Placer County, because it is the operator that provides services to all the jurisdictions as well as on to Sacramento. So that is something that we will explore with the Placer County Transit staff. And then, as noted earlier, coordinate regional marketing strategies amongst all the transit operators. And that wraps it up. Slide says, what do you think? This is an opportunity for the board to provide input, suggestions, commentary. We certainly would like to have direction as to whether we're looking at things that you think need to be looked at, if there's something that we missed. And then it's also an opportunity for the public at this point in time. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
I have a
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
Could we get a copy of that PowerPoint, please?
Oh, we will provide that, and it's been uploaded to our website as well.
Okay.
So any members of the public can, as of 5 p.m. yesterday, can
Okay.
download this PowerPoint.
Anybody have anything?
Not yet, I'll wait till then.
Okay,
Nope. I want you guys to speak first.
a second. Yeah, I'm glad you're looking at fare boxes and stuff like that, because I've been very worried about that part, is the service worth it?
Right.
And that's something we really need to look at. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and, now, anyone who said something during public comment, the board and the staff has taken into consideration anything you said, so please don't repeat what you said before, all right?
Does he need to
For the
officially open
opportunity
the
again
public
to,
hearing?
Yeah.
It's a workshop, not a hearing, but regardless.
okay. Sir, I don't know your name, but you prompted some of the things that were on my notes that I hadn't addressed. One of the things that, to encourage you all, the Sacramento Metro Transit, I had opportunity to have lunch with the Chief Financial Officer for Sacramento Metro Transit, and they're trying to work with Placer, Roseville, and other places to get more service from UC Davis Medical Center to downtown Sacramento, so that might be an area of collaboration and coordination there. One of the things that communities are doing, I believe it's Nextdoor is the name of the general website, but it's designed for different communities. Like Nextdoor Highland Reserve, they will share information with each other in a big area like Highland Reserve, and that might be an area where you can survey or use their connections to get more information. And I want to thank you for thinking of West Roseville in terms of Wood Creek and Blue Oaks and the Fitiment area, growing areas for population growth, and also to encourage everyone to look at future planning. Not, I know this is short range, 7 years, but in the medium range, short to medium range, we're planning to have a university from England and a convention center, which will also increase commercial and public transit needs in the area. And I use microtransit, I use TNC. However, once again, with the need for mass transit along major thoroughfares that have 4 lanes in both directions, like Pleasant Grove, Roseville Parkway, Eureka Road, and Douglas Boulevard. I think that would be a better way rather than to be dipping in and out of small neighborhoods and apartment complexes like the M bus line I've noticed had 2 to 3 people on it often, and that's a route that I travel very frequently. And these major 4-lane streets could service large areas like Walmart, Costco, Galleria, the Fountains, and the Sun City Roseville, so that people don't always have to use dial-a-ride, because they can go along these major routes and get to where they want. And not all seniors are, a lot of seniors at Sun City, which is an active Roseville community, can walk, a block or 2 or 3. Not in 100-degree weather, but, maybe something like in Phoenix, they actually change their route schedules and the way businesses open in 115, 110-degree weather. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
That lady left.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Board. Pardon me. I'm Tank Miller. I'm Executive Director of Placer Independent Resource Services here in Auburn. We're the state and federal designated Center for Independent Living that serves Placer, El Dorado, and Alpine counties, serving people with disabilities. I'm excited by everything I've seen on the PowerPoint. It's great to see the results of the surveys that have been done. Couple of additional comments that I'd offer. Regarding the demographics of this county, the Area Agency on Aging, Area 4, does a triennial study, which they completed last year, the most recent version, and also our county commission on advisory commission for on older adults also has done its own study, and they are showing that the aging of the population in this county exceeds the pace in most of the counties in this state. It's rapidly aging, and that I believe in 2020, something like 30% of the population of this county will be over age 55. That's going to have implications within this 7-year window for access to alternative transportation, to dial-a-ride. In these budgets in recent years, something like 4% of the budget has gone to the CTSA. I think that needs to go back up to 5% as it used to be. And within the 7-year window, it may need to go up even higher than 5%, because there's going to be a growing cadre of people who are not going to perhaps be able to drive anymore, and they're going to need dial-a-ride services. So that needs to be on the radar, so to speak. I'd also like to say that the short-range transit plans need to include an emergent, unforeseeable circumstance kind of provision, so that if something were to come up, perhaps as a result of a disaster like a fire, where something has to be done about transportation that would take it in a different course from what the adopted plan ends up saying, there needs to be a reasonable timeline for amending that plan and addressing that emergent situation. So some kind of language that would provide for that to occur in a timely kind of way. I'd like to see some kind of cross-jurisdictional type of agreements, specifically around dollar ride services, so that passengers would have to make fewer transfers if they're going from Auburn to somewhere in Roseville, and maybe they start in Auburn, they transfer at the Auburn transfer station, then they transfer at the Galleria station, and they finally get to their destination, and they've been, made 2 or 3 transfers, and it's taken them an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to get to their destination. Then they're going to conduct their business and they're going to repeat that in reverse. And so a lot of people that come to my agency do not embark on the trip because it's too exhausting, considering the type of disability that they have to go through all those transfers and all that time on the transportation. So cross-jurisdictional agreements that would allow a dollar ride unit to go directly from Auburn transfer station to the point of delivery in Roseville, or at least a transfer station, and eliminate the in-between stops would make those trips much easier for folks. Marketing, it was on several of the slides, but it wasn't really highlighted. It is a huge problem. People do not know what transportation services we have. They don't know how to access them. If they do know they exist, they don't know that they can get a free transfer from the Auburn transfer system to the Placer County transit system, and vice versa. They think they have to pay fare for each different system that they might use on a trip, and that's not always the case. And also that relates directly to what the other folks have said about identifying stops and that kind of thing. Somehow there needs to be communication with planning, land use and planning agencies in the various incorporated cities in the county to include in new development provisions to accommodate transit service that might eventually be extended into those areas. Not as an afterthought, but so there's room for bus stops, there's room for buses to turn around so they can actually travel on those streets. So that needs to go into consideration, that maybe not in the short-range transit plan, but as a planning procedure, I'll call it. And finally, I'd like to see exploration of some kind of shuttles that might operate, maybe as a pilot project, shuttles from outlying areas not served by public transit that could bring people into an appropriate point, maybe at a park and ride, to connect with existing fixed route or deviated route, whatever kind of service it is, so that folks from rural areas could connect up with the existing systems. And those shuttles might turn out to be Lyft or Uber, but it might be something else. So I'd just like to see us look at the widest spectrum of options. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Peter Eklund. I'm a resident of Rockland, and I've lived in Rockland for about 8 years. And I'm an observer of transit and land use. I've worked in the transportation and engineering and planning field for about 40 years, and I was a planning manager of a transit agency at one time. Just a couple of basic things I'd like to say. One is, in an area like Rockland or Roseville, where we are here, public transit is never going to meet all the needs. It's very limited, and for a couple important characteristics. One is just the land use, and then and spread out. And usually transit starts in a basic thing where you emphasize coverage. And it's very difficult to make a long trip because you're emphasizing coverage. And as you get more and more people and more demand, you can get a main route, which will go between major generators, and you can have some connecting services. This area doesn't have good routes between major generators. There's people in Rockland who can't get to the Sutter Hospital, can't get to Galleria, and vice versa. And one of the major problems is that boundary between Rockland and Roseville. There's no services that overlap in there, there's almost always, for a long trip, you're going to have to make a transfer from certain parts of the cities. And there's, almost all regions have routes that go a little bit into another community or something like that, and you can work out ways to do that. But that's the major problem with Rockland public transit. It's just a little bit of coverage, but you can't go between major generators. And it's a city with growing population. It's got 2 institutions of higher learning, high schools, and more. It seems to get more and more senior living areas. And one of the things that I'm really promising, some of the things I'm going to bring up, I have not heard any documents before, and a lot of them showed up here. And I'm sure that in this first go-around with them, very few can actually get implemented in a meaningful way, but they're all important. We need to talk about not transit, but mobility. And the people who are doing innovations today are Uber and Lyft. They're doing the innovation. And the reason they can do it, they don't have to go through bodies like this, and they've got very talented technical planning people who are initiating services. They do the first mile, last mile. They're coordinating with hospitals where doctors can call up Uber and Lyft and they can pick somebody up. You don't have to worry about dial-a-ride. They're connecting to transit in Marin County. There's a system over there where Lyft, there's a cost reduction for going to and from the things. And it can be done without cost reductions. You can do the last mile, first mile, just taking Uber or Lyft to a major stop, which is going to be a short trip, and then take transit to where you're going. So it can be done right now. We just need to talk about mobility and not just transit. And to do that, it's going to require some kind of organization to sort of get out the information. What I've heard here a lot is that nobody really can find out what's going on. Putting the schedules on a website where you can connect, you can connect to routes. It's very simple. It's cheap. It's virtually no cost. There's a format that a transit agency just has to submit data, submit it to a thing like MyTransit or something like that, and get right up. And I think a point that you talked about, seniors don't use smartphones. People are getting older and older. The people who are moving into the seniors know how to use smartphones, and more of them are using them. We should go more and more into providing the possibility of people just with their phone finding out when the next bus is coming. It doesn't have to be real time right away. It can just be a schedule. I think the systems actually work pretty well in schedule. The other one is infrastructure. If you're going to have the last mile, first mile, you want to be taken to a stop where you can sit down and in a bus stop, and you don't have to put them in houses. Put them on the arterials and the collectors where there are no houses. That's the important thing. That's marketing too. When they see a bus stop, people say, "Oh, there's a bus coming by here," and they'll look it up. That's part of marketing. There's virtually no marketing going on, as far as I can tell, for any of these systems. There's no incentives. You don't see merchants offering anything. You don't see, in public buildings, you can't pick up schedules. And so it's extremely difficult to find out any information about systems they're saying. And if you can get some kind of brochure together that lists all of the things, the senior things, the shuttles and number for Uber and stuff like that, that's important. Getting back to innovation, Lyft, they go to senior centers and provide training. Senior centers, they have brochures, how seniors can use Lyft and Uber. And Roseville, I know, actually trains seniors to use transit. I don't think this exists in Rockland, but Roseville has a program to do that. These are all things that are actually relatively cheap, and you don't have to put any more money into transit, and you can build up the ridership. And I think that's where, that's what we really need to look at, and we don't really need to expand. We need to reorganize some routes. And on one hand, it's very difficult to change routes. I've been through this process before because people live on routes for certain reasons, and so they're hard to change. But some realignment and kind of keeping them on the system is going to be very, very useful. And I want to emphasize the demographics too. There's more and more senior citizens coming up here, and also people moving out. The commuter services are equally important because more and more people are moving out. It's a little bit cheaper to live out here than it is in Sacramento, and so there's more and more commuting. And Sacramento's employment is going to continue to grow. So they need to focus more on commuters, and maybe it's done through private buses. And you can get away from the deadhead thing by having a private bus driver drive in. He stays there during the day and he drives home. You just have to find a parking place for the bus. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and it doesn't have. Unfortunately, it doesn't fall under the direct purview of the unmet needs for transit, but it's this mobility concept that we need to look at, and a lot of that, unfortunately, takes coordination and people working together. And one final thing on land use. There needs to be coordination between land use and transit. Even though there isn't a lot of transit, it needs to be there. When that new centers went out at Sierra College at the interchange, there was no coordination at all during the development of the project. Transit's going out there, but it was all done after the fact. You could have had a lot better transfer center and transit center if it was done during the process. And it's up to cities to say, look, this is a major generator, transit should go there, let's talk to the operator. You can't say that it's that they have to come to you for it. That's the city's issue. Any major generator should have opportunities for transit. And it should be done as part of the planning stage. I guess that's about all. But a lot of the stuff is said. I said there's probably 30 things that were brought up through these workshops that I haven't seen in documents before, and I kind of had them on my list. And so those are all great things, and I just hope they don't get lost. There's no way you're going to implement all that stuff, but initially, but don't let them get lost. And the people who are in school and getting older, they're aware of these things, Uber and Lyft, and car sharing and things like that. One final thing, drop the word signal preemption. Do not use that word. It should be signal priority. Signal preemption should never be used at major intersections, which is, that's the thing with where an emergency vehicle comes up, the operator hits a button and does it. Signal priority is when the operator doesn't do it, but if he's coming up on an intersection and you can extend the green, it'll allow him to get through, or maybe a little bit early. But signal preemption will actually screw everything up, and the operator will always push it. They've had, when they first started out, they'll always push the button if you do it that way. It should not be something the operator can do. It should be just tied in with a signal. And so that's the one word I would drop. Okay, that's all I said. I really support really everything that people have said, kind of falls into some of these other categories, and an additional service, I really would think in the concept of the mainline service and the secondary service. Concentrate on the main service and work out ways to do that last mile, first mile. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Lee Bastian, Sheridan Mac. And I'm happy to see Sheridan's on there again because I constantly get asked, when are we going to get transit service out here? So I'm happy to see it, and I appreciate the other comments and welcome all the opportunities we have for input into this.
Stole my pen.
Are there any other comments? Yes, come on up to the podium, please.
My name is Matthew Ellert. I serve as a case manager with Kids First. We're the Child Abuse Prevention Council of Placer County Counseling and Family Resource Center. So a lot of what we work with is families in a lower socioeconomic status, people who come across different difficulties. Anyone is eligible for services with Kids First on a number of different things. One thing that we have come across that has been a challenge for families, whether they're trying to get jobs or just to empower their families to come into a new place and be successful, is the difference in the Placer County transit services and that of the Roseville transit services. And so what I mean by that is often what we found is we've even tried to provide the one-way bus tickets to help families is they don't work with the Roseville transit versus the Placer County transit, or that the bus routes are so different. I believe the gentleman here shared that there's a difficulty with one knowing the routes that are in Placer County and or in Roseville, but also to cross the barrier between them. So if I think Placer County Transit goes to Galleria, it goes to one other location kind of on the outskirts of Roseville, but then Roseville kind of takes care of a lot of those pieces in their city, understandably, right? But the question is there a possibility to, one, kind of integrate them together to where they can cross over into Roseville to create a more cohesive support for the families, whether they're trying to, re-empower their lives, right? Maybe there's services in Roseville, Kirby Hills, a number of different things, or just with their families and going to the Roseville community and vice versa. And then two, I know it was mentioned the Connect card. Could a form of payment be made to where I can pay for Placer County and for Roseville with the same one, So those were just the thoughts that I had with the bus cards not working for Roseville, and we tried to support families with it, and maybe having something that can work with both sides or multiple agencies. But thank you.
Thank you.
I know I already spoke, but I forgot to say one thing. I'm Tink Miller again. Uber and Lyft services are not wheelchair accessible, and that's the huge barrier that somehow is going to have to be abridged. And it has implications that the operators may need to continue, if the services were to go that direction, contract with those types of services. They may still have to operate some paratransit or dollar ride vehicles of their own in order to ensure full access to the services available. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
Sorry.
Hi, Mike Garabedian for the Sierra Club Placer Group. Many things we had to say, especially by independent living, but others, including the importance of land use integration with transportation and mobility, have been said. So it leaves me a couple of major key points to make. And that is what the Sierra Club feels is a need to look at transit in the South County, West Placer area. Where we've got the 65 corridor north-south approach. I'm not sure that's the best corridor for transit or major looking at how to deal with all the development that's proposed out as we go west. You can look at the 65 corridor, but it brings into the question of where to put major north-south. And our advocacy is increasingly for a transit solution, a north-south solution that's integrated and so forth, as was discussed here. And I say it's not necessarily a 65 corridor because we have massive building starting with Placer Vineyards, which will be using Watt Avenue, they say. So we to the extent that there have been studies looking at alternatives, and we need to be integrating that and developing new approach to look at that corridor for getting people out of their cars. Right now, we're kind of adding on. We're looking at I know that you use existing general plans as your basis. But we need to, especially as we're tying this local into a long-term planning, We need to have a way to look ahead and take transit as a major factor in itself, so that we aren't completely continuing to depend on adding more highway capacity as opposed to getting people out of their cars. And the things we're talking about, local transit, really feed into that whatever we're going to do regionally, north-south, as we're advocating. We think it's very important on a different tack that developer fees should go into transit infrastructure and other transportation infrastructure. It's a major point. Of course, and just on Uber, these Uber and Lyft, they are increasing vehicle traffic in I think a lot of situations. That needs to be looked at. And not only that, they are cheating. They are taking people from transit. Now, you know, there are arguments both ways on that. I think we have, that needs, I don't know that I think they are new, relatively new compared to the 7 years ago. So I think there really needs to be some careful study about to what extent the new kinds of tech-oriented services really should be replacing, you know, transit. I just don't, there are many issues with that in terms of the programming and how it's done that shouldn't be driving, how we decide to drive or not drive. Their orientation and how they work is not something that you can necessarily, or anybody, I guess according to the testimony, can regulate, including Congress. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, on how tech services are used in these situations. But that's a whole other thing. You know, there have been some studies related to this in other areas. There's increasing data, and I think all three of the points I've just talked about, I think, give you a lot to do and think about, and we look forward to working on this. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, with that, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Comments from the board? Okay. All right, then I'm going to move on to the Placer County Regional Bikeway Plan Draft Network Recommendations.
Chair, Board of Directors, I thank you for this opportunity this morning. We're excited to present our recommendations for the Regional Bikeway Plan. Here to assist me this morning, I have Matt Broughton from Kittleson Associates. He's our consultant who's been providing us assistance with updating the Regional Bikeway Plan. And I also have Stephanie Holloway from Placer County to answer any questions that may come up. I'm going to go through this a little bit faster than I had anticipated, given our time schedule today and acknowledgement of your schedules. But we're going to touch on primarily the regional bikeway plans and recommendations. But I do want to touch on where we've came from and what our next major milestones are. The regional bikeway plan was originally adopted by the Placer County Board of Supervisors in 2002. It was an update to the 1988 plan. It identified a system of bikeway facilities throughout Placer County intended for recreational commuter purposes. And at that point in time, the impetus for that was to meet the requirements of the bicycle transportation account that was a primary funding source across the state for bikeways. I'm not going to get into any of the details of what's happened since 2002. We can all think of at least 5 to 6 of those off the top of our head of what's happened here in Placer County. But two maybe of the more important points to point out is that interest in cycling continues to increase. Cycling for work purposes, commuters, accounts for less than 1%, but those who do commute to work have increased about 40-50% over the course of the last 10 years, according to the Census Bureau statistics. And if you look at it not just for commuting purposes, look at those who do cycle for recreation or health, those numbers in May of 2017 for the May is Bike Month, Placer County residents rode over 200,000 miles in the county, and many of our jurisdictions competing in this, our residents competing from our jurisdictions, ranked up in the top 10 across the 6-county Sacramento region. So there continues to be interest in driving bikeways and facilities within our county. The update will refresh the vision for the bikeway system. It will look at planning for trails and bikeways that people want to use. And in some cases, they probably are already using those, but in less than ideal conditions. And also coordinate with those planning efforts for the 6 incorporated cities. We'll recommend bikeway improvements based on the best practices and close gaps in existing facilities. Improve the county's statewide grant success and applying for new funding with the Active Transportation Program. The upcoming cycle is going to provide over $400 million statewide through competitive grants. So having this plan in place and identifying a top 10 list may help bring additional dollars to the county. And also this plan will be one of the tools that the county will have to utilize and point to in their sustainability plan that's currently being updated. Just to recap quickly, we launched a public outreach effort back in June 2017, and I can say myself I was a little skeptical of going out through a virtual outreach effort. This was not a sit-down meeting, everyone come to me, look at some boards we have in the background, but it was all online. We had a questionnaire that had 7 quick questions, and we had an interactive web map. For those who participated in the 7 questions on different cycling habits, thoughts, we had over 700 people participate in that questionnaire. And those who participated in the interactive bikeway map were residents from Roseville, from Colfax, from the Granite Bay Area, across the county. We had over 229 visitors leave over 600 comments. So through our virtual outreach efforts, we received way more input than I think we could have ever hoped for in having multiple meetings throughout the county and various gymnasiums. So through all the information that we've received from the public, we've sat back, looked at the community plans for the unincorporated area that have been developed for Sheridan, for Forest Hill, looked at these comments, and tried to piece together what we are recommending as bikeway improvements, or planning for bikeway improvements in the unincorporated area. This will be the first rolling this out to receive input from the public, from you. We'll be going to the MACs, the Municipal Advisory Committees also on this. So now I'd like to turn it over to Matt Broughton to highlight some of the recommendations that we have throughout the unincorporated region.
Thank you, Aaron, and good morning. So to just set the table for how we think about biking, a lot has changed, as Aaron mentioned, in the county, but then also in the way that we think about what an appropriate bikeway facility is for a different number of users. And I think just from the framework, a couple key points is that with bikeway planning, we've really shifted now to thinking about a range of different types of solutions to fit with the context and the type of user that we're expecting. So a recreational bicyclist going on a 100-mile bike ride is going to have a different expectation of a facility versus somebody that's just trying to get their kid to school on a bike. And I think the other key point just from our framework here is just that we really wanted to emphasize making those key regional connections, so connecting into some of the unincorporated communities and providing a bikeway network that's allowing people to get around within those communities and then throughout there. And as part of that, we came up with kind of a framework concept here made up of 4 different concepts for bikeway facility planning. So the blue dots around the county are community focus areas where we're prioritizing those more comfortable routes for a diverse and wide range of bike users. The green being the community connections, providing connections between those communities, and again, emphasizing a more diverse but probably a little bit more limited for people that are going to be riding between the different communities within the county. The kind of pinkish color that's showing up there are the regional connectors. So one key item for this bikeway plan, we want to make sure that we're connecting out and making sure that our bikeway plan isn't being developed in isolation just for Placer County, but making connections across the county. And then in the red there is just highlighting the key recreational routes that exist within the county, and we wanted to make sure that we're addressing the needs of recreational cyclists as part of this bikeway plan because they are a large community of bicyclists within the county. So I'll quickly walk through, and I'm going to keep it relatively brief, just our recommended network. I'm just going to hit on some key points for each of the areas. So obviously Western Placer County represents the majority of the population within the county, and as a result, the bikeway network is much more dense in this area. A couple key points to highlight. So Old Highway 65 and Taylor Road were both prioritized for more separated facilities as they were kind of key backbone routes that are connecting a number of different communities and really providing key regional connections. And then up to the north, in the northern part of the county, we really wanted to emphasize providing recreational routes, so finding opportunities to add bike lanes where we can, and where we can't, making sure that we're signing and striping so that motorists are aware that they might see a cyclist along those routes. And so Hidden Falls being one of the key connection points that we wanted to make in the western part of the county. And I'll just pause really quickly here. Just these are kind of the key focus areas that we wanted to emphasize. I won't read through each of these. But focusing in on Sheridan, this is an example of a community focus area, so where we're prioritizing really a diverse range of users and kind of a little bit of a different approach in terms of the bikeway planning. So the darker red lines there are what we would call a bicycle boulevard, and so what that is it's using signing and striping like a typical bike route, but focusing those in on low speed and low volume roadways so that bicyclists, so that you'd be comfortable letting your kid ride out there to school, to the park, and making sure that we're connecting those key destinations. And then as we progress into higher speed and higher volume interactions with motor vehicles, we provide more separation with bike lanes, and then in the case of Highway 65, providing a physically separated facility. Again, so focusing in on the community center and schools, and then connecting out throughout the region and out of the region to Wheatland and Yuba County. For Newcastle and Penryn, again, very similar concept, a little bit more rural context, but within Newcastle and Penryn, prioritizing again those low-speed bikeway networks, and then where we do have higher speeds, in the case of Penryn, along English Colony Way, prioritizing a bike lane to connect between the school and the neighborhoods there. And then with Taylor Road, as I mentioned, as a key separated bikeway facility, and recreational routes going out from there to connect to some of the key rec areas, as well as into the more urbanized part of the county. So just, again, some of the key connections that we're making there. In Granite Bay, a little bit different context, just because it is a more urbanized area, part of the county, and we are dealing with larger arterial roadways and collector roadways where a lot more vehicle traffic and higher speeds. And so the darker blue lines that you see there are buffered bike facilities, so that's providing a separation through paint for bicyclists so that they are getting that a little bit extra separation away from the roadway, and just providing a little bit more comfort to allow a wider range of bicyclists to feel comfortable riding along those roadways. And again, so focusing in on some of those key collectors and arterials to connect those neighborhoods to some of the recreational opportunities and into the cities. In North Auburn, a very similar context, a little bit lower volume interaction with motor vehicles. So the bikeway type has been, we're focusing mostly on bike lanes for these connections, and then also providing, as you get out of the urbanized area, focusing in on those key recreational routes that are currently being used by recreational cyclists to make sure that there's appropriate signing and striping in place to notify both cyclists to be aware of motor vehicle interactions, but also making motorists aware that they should expect to see bicyclists on those roads. And then also I just note heading out to Meadow Vista and up to Colfax, prioritizing getting some bike lanes in where we can until we get into the more mountainous part of the region. And so again, some of the key connections that we're focused on. So for central Placer County, kind of the key focus here is connecting up to the communities of Forest Hill and into the city of Colfax. Primarily recreational riding in this part of the county, and so that's why you see a lot of those red colors. Those are key bike routes that are currently used by those people looking to climb up the mountain roadways. You'll see on the way out to Forest Hill a brown colored roadway there, and that's a facility that we're prioritizing to put a widened shoulder or bike lane on one side of the roadway in the uphill direction, since a bicyclist needs more space when they're climbing, And then when they're coming down the hill, they're actually traveling typically at the same speed as motor vehicles, so they don't need as much separation. And again, I just say for Forest Hill, prioritizing those lower stress facilities within that area. So again, just key connections that we're focused on. And then finally, in eastern Placer County, because the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency actually recently adopted their own bicycle and pedestrian master plan for the region. We're adopting their recommendations under their jurisdiction there. And so really the key focus in eastern Placer County is connecting between the Tahoe Basin up to Truckee along State Route 89 and State Route 267 with physically separated facilities because of the high speed, volume, and mountainous character of the roadway. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron just to talk quickly through schedule.
All right. Thank you, Matt. So each of you should have also received copies of those maps, so those are available. Those are on our website under the Bikeway Planning Update page, and we'll be rolling this out through the municipal advisory councils, as I mentioned, throughout this month and into early next month, given some of their schedules and not meeting every month. So we'll be doing that. We're taking public input. We met with our Regional Bicycle Steering Committee, which is representation from the cycling clubs here in Placer County, residents from Roseville, Colfax area, who are familiar with some of these roadways and have a intimate understanding of some of the challenges out there and where some of the opportunity points might be. So we're taking input with them as well as meeting with your staff all month to make sure that the lines match up at the boundaries, that we're not proposing bike lanes in the unincorporated area where there's no bike lane or a different type of bike facility in the incorporated area. So we want to make sure there's consistency across boundaries. We'll be refining the network through April, releasing draft report in May, and then coming back to you with the final report or draft final report in June. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions you have, any feedback, direction from you.
Any questions from the board? Any questions? What's that? Any questions from the public?
Hi, Mike Garabedian for Placer Group Sierra Club. The question is for the gentleman, well, and for yourselves, the connection between bike use and transit and transportation. Maybe that's already covered in other studies or work. I'm not sure. But then in terms of their work, it wasn't clear from what they said to me that the locating of those routes, how they relate to connections to transit and so forth.
So in response to that, yes, when we looked at the different types of needs, we went through a needs and assessment, needs and demands analysis within the county. We looked at where the parks are, where major destinations, where transit stops are, and ensuring that we can multimodally get people where they want to go, whether it's recreation, whether it's for job services. So a lot of the transit networks that we do have fall on certain major routes. And within the incorporated areas, there are cycling bikeways there, as well as in the unincorporated areas feeding into Nevada Street, where the multimodal center are there, or to some other locations.
This is Peter Eklund again. Two quick comments. One is I think it's important for the the tie-in with transit to provide a concept of major stops, where major stops you can put some secure bike facilities. And they can be bike lockers, and they can sort of be self-supporting because people can pay a daily charge for that. Because that'll really help, though, that last mile, first mile thing. And Rockland and Roseville are very good for biking, and I think that's a way to increase ridership at marginal cost. The second one, I was really glad to see the buffered bike lanes. And I noticed that those are new facilities, but it's a concept that is, I think is very important for on any roadway that has a speed higher than, say, 35 miles per hour. And I think it's worth looking at retrofitting, the buffers into onto roads that already have bike lanes. could do it when there's a repaving project where everything is restriped. Otherwise it wouldn't make sense. But you could take a foot away from each lane. There are now 12. It'd be fine. Have 11-foot lanes, and you could create a buffer, and that would really encourage bike riding more.
Tink Miller again, Placer Independent Resource Services. Those comments just reminded me, bike sharing programs, which are in many urban areas, also have great potential, I think, here. And there's a program that I discovered recently in, I believe it's Portland, Oregon, that has added accessible vehicles of various types and styles of bicycles and riding devices for people with various disabilities, and included those into their bike sharing programs so that it makes it a really accessible program for everybody in the community to participate. Thank you.
Okay, with that,
Mike Garabedian. An issue I thought it'd be good to bring up, just thinking, is the present design and use and not lack of enforcement perhaps, or enforcement of the way bike lanes are structured. For instance, in Roseville, there are solid lines people aren't supposed to cross, and they cross them all the time. And then there are those dotted lines that are, I think, meant to be the merge areas. So the question is, what is going on in terms of enforcement like that? A lot of people just ignore them completely. Once or twice, I have been in a situation where there was somebody biking there and somebody ignored it. It would have been a real problem for the rider. So it's an enforcement issue, and I wonder if we are talking about change of design of how these things are laid out that might contribute to solving some of the safety problems. And then again, the question of enforcement. What is in the county service area, CHP or sheriff or local police, what are their policies in terms of enforcing people who are endangering bike riders that way?
okay, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close off this subject. Does the board need a break before we adjourn into closed session?
We're going to closed session, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll pass the restrooms on the way to closed session.
Okay. All right. Then at this time, pursuant to cited authority, all references are to government code. The Placer County Transportation Planning Agency will hold a closed session to discuss the following listed items. A report on any action taken or presented prior to adjournment. 54957, public employee appointment, title, executive director. And with that, we're adjourning the closed session. Okay, with that, we are out of closed session and going back into open session. And that closed session was to hire on a new executive director since Celia is retiring. Where'd my paperwork go here? And the new director is going to be Michael Lucan. And Michael, if you'd like to come up and say a couple words.
And his start date will be May the 14th. And I also note that the board did approve his contract.
Yes. Thank you, Celia.
Good morning. Thank you for having me to my first meeting of your board. It was very informative, good public hearings. Just wanted to thank you for allowing me to go through the process and for hiring me. It'll be the first time in my career that I get to work in my own home where I live. And so this is going to be a great opportunity for me, and I look forward to working with you. So given the length of the hearing, I'll keep that short, and I'm sure you'll be hearing lots from me very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, we'll need to go on to informational items, executive director's report.
Yes, I just have, I'll be very brief. I wanted to update the board on what's going on the 8065 interchange. As you know, we did the groundbreaking in December, and all the contract documents were completed in March. You'll start seeing the construction signs going up, showing the funding by all the parties, including Sparta and PCTPA and the Highway 65 JPA. Those will be starting towards the end of this month, around April the 30th. Motorists are going to start noticing construction equipment in mid-May, and that's going to be towards the north end of the viaduct, as well as at the Galleria Stanford Ranch interchange. We're working with AIM Communications. They're going to be doing a lot of the project updates. We're going to have quarterly newsletters. We've got a website, and working with the local agencies, public information officers, and then Caltrans is going to handle a lot of the construction details and getting that information out through their public information officers. And I also wanted to note that the Highway 65 widening is moving forward. We had the long environmental process. I know you're all aware of that. We got those environmental documents were approved by Caltrans March the 6th. There's a 30-day review period that allows for protests, and that closed I guess April 6th, and we don't know if we got any comment, but we're keeping our fingers crossed, and in the meantime, we're going straightforwardly into design on that project as approved by the board. That concludes my executive director's report.
Do we have an expected schedule for construction?
Yes, we are on the expected construction. We expect to be done on the 8065 interchange. It has a
He's talking about the widening.
Oh, the widening, we still don't have the money for the widening, but we do have enough money to get it designed in phases, so we're doing what we can on that to keep it moving. But ultimately, we're still trying to find money for the construction of that widening.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
That concludes my report.
Okay, with that, is there any board direction to staff?
This is your last shot.
Like we want to stay here longer.
Okay. I'll write
Yeah,
it
I'd like
down.
to enjoy yourself, so you've earned it. Okay.
So before you leave, you have a couple weeks, can you go find the money for the widening?
Okay. Actually, we are working on it. We do have a grant application out there.
Because they're saying, how can you approve more new homes when the congestion, they just need to go to LA and San Francisco and experience what real
Okay, is
congestion.
there anything on informational items? No. All right, with that, I think we're gonna adjourn.